Welcome to The Explainer. We're going to break down some huge headlines today. And believe me, what's happening halfway across the world in the Middle East, well, it's connected to what's going on right here at home. So let's dive in. Okay, here's what's on deck. We're starting with this major conflict overseas, but you're going to see how it's already affecting things like the price of gas and even your travel plans. Then we'll shift gears to some pretty surprising health news you'll want to hear. And we'll wrap up by looking at how tech is changing, well, just about everything. Let's get to it. All right, let's jump right into our top story. Things are getting really tense in the Middle East. We're seeing this incredibly volatile back and forth of attacks, and it's sending shockwaves way beyond the region. So overnight, this whole situation just exploded. It was like a chain reaction, one thing after another. First, Iran reportedly attacks energy sites in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Israel wastes no time and hits back with strikes on Tehran. Then, and this is a big one, a U.S. jet has to make an emergency landing, possibly from enemy fire. And that's the last straw for the Pentagon. They're now fast-tracking thousands of more troops into the area. It's a textbook tit-for-tat escalation, and it's all happening incredibly fast. Naturally, everyone's asking, how long is this going to last? Well, when reporters asked Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu for a timeline, his answer was, well, it was pretty blunt. He basically said, I'm not putting a stopwatch on it. He's talking about achieving some huge goals, like taking out Iran's entire missile and nuclear programs. That doesn't sound like a quick fight. It really signals this could be a long, drawn-out conflict, even as the rest of the world is screaming for everyone to cool it. And this isn't just about what's happening on the battlefield. The political fallout is spreading like wildfire. Here in the U.S., the president is getting hammered for what critics are calling mixed messages about sending troops. And our allies in Europe? Apparently, they're showing a complete lack of interest in working with the U.S. on this. Meanwhile, back home, you've got Americans asking really tough questions about the cost, not just in money, but in lives. The Pentagon can say its defenses are working great, knocking down over 90% of missile strikes, but that doesn't seem to be helping with the political mess.
Speaking of costs, it's not just political. The economic shockwaves from all this are already hitting us right here. And yeah, the first place you're going to feel that pain is at the gas pump.
I mean, just look at these numbers. The national average for a gallon of gas is now $3.91. A month ago, it was under $3. That's almost a whole dollar increase in just 1 month. And why? It's a direct result of Iran blocking the Strait of Hormuz. That's a huge deal. About a fifth of the world's entire oil supply goes through that little channel. And the cost at the pump is just the start. The price tag for the war itself is just staggering. The administration is going to Congress and asking for $200 billion. And they're framing it as a small price to pay. But let's put that number in perspective for a second. That's more than any single emergency funding request for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, even at their highest point. It's an absolutely massive amount of money.
So, how are voters feeling about all this? Well, if you look at a key swing district in Pennsylvania, it's complicated. People are all over the map. You have some folks saying, look, if I have to pay a little more for gas to keep us safe, so be it. Then you have others who are just flat out against any war. And then there's this other group, people who voted for the president but are now having some serious buyer's remorse. It just goes to show you what a tightrope the administration is walking right now.
Okay, let's shift focus back home now, where a whole different set of problems are brewing. We're talking about political gridlock and some really wild weather, and they're teaming up to cause huge headaches for millions of people. Let's start at the airport. Because of a partial government shutdown, TSA agents are working without pay again. This is the third time in just 6 months. So what happens? Well, a lot of them are calling out sick. The national call-out rate has hit 10%. And this is all happening during the peak of spring break travel. Not good.
And you can't really blame them. For a lot of these agents, the money situation is just impossible. They've got bills piling up, landlords knocking. So what are they doing? They're quitting. More than 300 TSA officers have just walked away from the job. That's a huge blow to a system that was already stretched pretty thin.
So what does this mean for you, the traveler? Pure chaos. If you're flying out of a major hub like Atlanta, the busiest airport in the world, you could be waiting in security lines for up to 2 hours. And experts are warning it could get worse. If this shutdown keeps going, some smaller airports might have to close down completely. The whole system could just grind to a halt. And as if the airport mess wasn't enough, Mother Nature decided to join the party. We've got this insane March heat wave breaking records all over the West. We're talking 38 million people under heat alerts. In a place like Denver, it was 33 degrees hotter than it normally is. It feels more like July than the first day of spring out there. Okay, so speaking of spring, even if it feels more like summer, it's still that time of year for a little spring cleaning. And experts are saying there's one spot we all forget about but is super important to clean out: your medicine cabinet. You know, medical advice changes all the time, but the stuff in our medicine cabinets, that can sit there for years. So maybe it's time to take a look at a few old standbys. First up, things that just don't work. An FDA panel pretty much confirmed that phenylephrine, that's the decongestant in a ton of cold medicines, is basically useless. Same thing for the stool softener Colis and even codeine cough syrups. Study after study shows they're no better than a sugar pill. Then you have things where the advice has totally changed, like taking a baby aspirin every day. For a lot of people over 60, doctors now say don't do it to prevent a first heart attack because the bleeding risk is too high. And even something like Benadryl, there are now much newer, safer options out there for allergies and sleep, especially for older folks. So, okay, we're throwing out old medicines, but what about old habits? Let's talk about the big one: a glass of wine a day. Is it actually good for you? Well, a new study just dropped some really interesting new info into that debate. Get this, the study was huge. It followed over 300,000 people, and it found that moderate wine drinkers had a 21% lower risk of dying from heart disease compared to people who don't drink at all. Now, the keyword here is moderate, and also it seems to be specific to wine. What's really wild is that the same study found that even a little bit of beer or liquor was linked to a higher risk of death from heart problems. So it really makes that finding about wine stand out. All right, let's switch gears from our physical health to the, well, health of our culture, I guess. We're seeing how new tech and some old habits are creating some really big challenges. Let's start with a couple of cautionary tales that have been in the news. Okay, this first one is fascinating. Researchers from Google and a few universities are worried about what they call the blandification of writing. Basically, when people use AI to help them write, their writing gets boring. It becomes more formal, less passionate, with fewer personal stories. The AI just kind of spits out these safe, neutral arguments and loves to use corporate speak like robust frameworks. It's not just changing how we write, it's changing what we're actually saying. And here's something else to worry about. You've probably noticed that online sports betting is everywhere now that it's legal. Well, it's creating a huge crisis for kids. A recent survey found something pretty shocking. Over 40% of boys between 14 and 17 have gambled in the last year. And get this, 30% of boys as young as 11 to 13 have too. Experts say it's a massive problem, just fueled by how easy it is to do on your phone and the ads being everywhere. And it's leading to addiction and some really awful consequences for these kids and their families. We're going to end today on a more somber note with two stories that serve as important reminders. The first is just heartbreaking. A 20-year-old American college student who was in Barcelona for spring break was found dead after a 3-day search. Just tragic. And second, it's been 5 years since the actor Chadwick Boseman died from colon cancer. He was only 43 and fought that battle in private while becoming this huge inspiration to so many people. It's a moment to remember his incredible legacy. So yeah, it's a lot to take in today. From global conflicts to our medicine cabinets, to the technology that's changing how we think and act. It really leaves you with a big question, right? In a world where all this stuff is coming at us 24/7, how do we possibly stay informed and engaged without just getting completely overwhelmed by it all? That's all for this